Claire.
Yeah, declare, I'm sorry.
Welcome everybody to Crocheting in the Round on this Monday afternoon. Darren is going to be your teacher. He's the one there on screen, but my name is Claire and I'll be hanging out in the Zoom chat with you all. If you have questions during the course of the class on anything we're covering, please use the Zoom chat function and I'll answer you there directly or I'll forward it on to Darren. I'll also be putting the handout for class, which is just that cute little jellyfish octopus pattern. I'll be putting that in the chat as both a PDF and as a link if you're on a mobile device. And now that all of that is taken care of, we'll let Darren take over.
All right, welcome to class. Today, we are going to learn all the skills we need to make this little amigurumi jelly. I call it a jellyfish. I think the pattern's calling it an octopus, but I feel like that looks more like a jellyfish to me. But it could be whatever you want it to be, right? So we're going to learn all the skills we'll need to make this. And then once you learn these skills, you can take those skills and then move forward with them to lots of other projects. So that's the great thing about learning how to make one thing, then you can apply those skills to making lots of other things. So basically think of it as we're kind of like an introduction to crocheting in the round. And we're going to review a couple of different ways, a couple of different techniques of how to do it. And then you can kind of do what you like best and what works best for you. So this jellyfish that I've been showing here and playing with is made with Pound of Love. I don't know if you can read that, there's kind of a glare. This is Pound of Love. It's a worsted weight yarn by Lion Brand, and it's available on lionbrand.com. And it weighs a pound, so there's a lot of yarn here. So you buy this, you could make, so I made this jellyfish and I still have this much left. So you could make a whole bunch of things. So pick a color you like, then you can make all kinds of stuff. It's a great yarn to work with. It's a great yarn to have on hand. It's also available on michaels.com. So you can get this pretty much anywhere and it comes in a lot of great colors. So it's available. So if we want to go ahead and switch the view to the view of my hands, we can go ahead and get started. So for demonstrating today, I'm going to be using, for the most part, I'm going to be demonstrating with this yarn, which is Hometown Bonus Bundle, which is a number 6 yarn. And this is also available at michaels.com or on lionbrand.com. And the reason I'm demonstrating with this yarn is because it shows up good on camera. So it's a very good yarn for all different types of projects, but I especially like it for demonstrating because it shows up very nice on camera. And so for demonstrating today with this yarn, because this yarn calls for a large crochet hook, which is an N13 or a 9mm. So for demonstration purposes today, I'm using the Hometown Bonus Bundle, and I'm using this little ball of it that I have on hand, and I'm using this crochet hook. But if you do want to make this jellyfish, you're going to want to use a worsted weight yarn. And so this original pattern is calling for a Star is Born Nap Time, which is a number 3. And it is having you use a size D crochet hook. But for the worsted weight yarn that I think I used an I. So you want to go down a little bit. Worsted weight usually calls for a J. So for an amigurumi, you want to go down a little bit in size. So I like to use different yarns than what the pattern is calling for, because I want to demonstrate to my students that you don't have to follow the pattern exactly. So especially a toy. So this is an octopus or a jellyfish. You can use you could use sock weight yarn. You could use a number 7 weight yarn. And what's going to happen is you're going to get a jellyfish that is much larger or much smaller. But you want to make sure you're using the hook that's appropriate. So that's why I do like to use different yarns when I'm teaching, because I want my students to get the idea that you can kind of break free from the pattern. You don't have to do exactly what the pattern is telling you. So any questions about anything we've talked about so far? I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So for crocheting in the round, the first thing we need to do is start with a slip knot. And this There's a lot of different slip knots that you can make, a lot of different ways of making a slip knot. But the way I'm going to demonstrate today is called short over long. And we've got our ball of yarn, which is our working yarn. We've got this long piece, which is connected to our working yarn. And then this is the short piece, which is the tail that we're going to use for finishing later. So you want to lay it out like this. Put the tail over top of your working yarn. So the short is over the long. Put your hand inside of this circle. You're going to make a loop. Put your hand inside the loop. And then you're going to sneak under the loop like this. You're going to grab hold of the working yarn. And then with your other hand, you're going to hold on to the tail and hold on to the working yarn. And then you're just going to loop that back through, and you're going to create a slip knot. Now for crochet, it's very, very nice, and it's ultimately very helpful if the tail, if by pulling the tail, that's what controls the size of the slip knot. So you want to try to do that when you're crocheting. Knitting, it's not quite such a big deal, but for crochet, it's very nice if the tail is what controls it. So by laying it out, there are many ways of doing it. This is certainly not the only way, but this is just an easy way to kind of start. It's an easy way to do it. So lay it out like this, short over long, the tail over your working yarn. Put your hand in that loop, sneak underneath that loop, grab hold of the tail. Now you're going to want to hold your working yarn and the tail together. You're going to loop, hook the tail with one of your fingers and just kind of pull it through. And so now I've got this great big loop, but I'm going to use, by pulling my tail, I'm adjusting the size of my loop. Pop that right on your crochet hook, and then you're ready to start. Okay, any questions about the slip knot? Most people probably might know that already if you've crocheted before. So if we want to look at how are we doing, Claire? Any questions? I don't want to rush past if people did have questions.
No questions so far.
Okay, so if we look at our pattern, the first thing it's telling us to do is chain 2. And the next instruction is telling us to work 8 half double crochets in the second chain from the hook. Do not join. We're going to work in continuous rounds or a spiral. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. So I left quite a long tail. I'm going to snip that off a little bit so it's out of the way. So for chaining, you just kind of want to hold the yarn right under your hook to kind of give it some tension, and just tension your yarn however it's comfortable in your hand. And you chain 2. So 1, 2. How do we feel? Do we know how to chain, or do we need a demonstration on chaining? How do we feel about it? Feel okay? So we're going to work 8 half double crochet in that chain. So for a half double crochet, you start with the yarn over and second chain from the hook. So you don't count the loop that's on your hook. So 1 and then 2. That's the second chain from my hook. The one on your hook never counts. So yarn over, enter the chain, bring up a loop, yarn over, go through all 3. That is a half double. So yarn over, go in, bring up a loop, go through all 3. So that's 2, 3. Oops, I didn't do it right. So yarn over, 2 loops on my hook, bring up a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, bring it through all 3. Do we know how to double, or do we know how to do a half double, or do we need a more in-depth review of it? So start with the yarn over, go through, bring up a loop, yarn over, pull it through all 3 loops. I like a half double.
We do have a request to review how to do the half double.
So half double. So I've just got my working loop. So this loop doesn't really count. So yarn over. It does kind of count. We kind of count it sometimes. So yarn over, and then you enter your fabric, bring up a loop. So we're going to count this now for this time. So I have 1, 2, 3. We have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull it through all 3. So half double, start with the yarn over, enter enter your fabric, bring up a loop, yarn over, pull it through all, okay? And that is a half double. So with crochet, it is nice to mark your work when you're working in rounds. You want to be able to know where the round starts and where it stops. So it is nice to have a stitch marker. And I'm going to put this stitch marker right here on my first half double. So it's probably smart to do that. Like as soon as you make your half double, go ahead and pop that stitch marker on there. So that's how you always know where you're going to be. Starting and stopping. So referring back to our pattern, work 8 half double in the second chain from the hook. Do not join. We're going to work in continuous rounds, which is a spiral. So let me show you how that is. And then when we start the next one, we're going to work two half double crochet in each stitch around. And we're going to end with 16. We're going to have a total of 16. If you can see that. I hope you guys have a copy of the pattern. Oh, I didn't really talk about the pattern. So this is a pattern from Lion Brand Yarn. It's a free pattern, so you can go to lionbrandyarn.com. If you type in Octopus Amigurumi, or if you type in this pattern number, it will bring it up, you download it, you can print it for free. So it's always going to be there for you to print for free. Lionbrand.com, okay? So I'm going to demonstrate a couple of things here, but first I'm going to demonstrate how the pattern is telling us to do it. So I finished my round. There is my first half double. So I'm going to yarn over, and I'm just going to go right in there where that half double was. So just go right into that half double. And there's really not a lot to see here. So I'll do it again in a second to show you what I'm doing. And I'll move this stitch marker up to mark that's my new beginning or my new ending, however you want to look at it. So yarn over, and then I'm going to do another half double in that same spot. Okay, and so now I've finished my first round. I'm starting my second round. So yarn over, enter my stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through all 3, yarn over. So now I'm going in the same stitch. And that's taking 1 stitch and turning it into 2 stitches. So we're increasing. Yarn over, enter the stitch, yarn over. All right. So I'm not going to go all the way around because it's just more of the same. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go back and make sure everybody understands how to start the second round. Did we have any questions about that? This is where it was. Oops, I did a couple of those. So for working in a spiral, finish your half doubles for the first round. Okay, one more. All right, finished my half doubles. I'm going to start my second round. So right here is the stitch marker marking my first half double on round 1. So just start with your next half double. So yarn over, I'm going to enter that stitch, yarn over, bring up a loop, yarn over, and then come through both. And then now is a good time to put your stitch marker marking where the round starts and stops, yarn over, and I'm going to do a half double in the same stitch to start my increase round. All right, any questions about how to do start your second row working in a spiral? How are we doing, Claire? It's pretty easy, but sometimes it's so easy that when you're learning it, you feel like you're missing something, like there's some kind of a special trick happening, but there really was not a special trick happening. Okay, so if there are no questions about that, I want to show you another way you can do it, which is called working in joined rounds. And so there's a difference. So I'm going to finish up, put my stitch marker to mark my first one. Finish up my half doubles for round one. Just do my half doubles here. All right, so here's my first. This is my first half double on my first round. And so for a join, which is not in this pattern, but you could do it however you want. You could do it this way. So for the joined rounds, I'm going to join it with a slip stitch. So I'm just going to enter that first stitch. So just enter that stitch, yarn over, bring it through, bring it through. And then now I have to do I have to chain up. So for a half double, I'm going to chain 2. And if you were doing single, you would chain 1. And if you're doing double, you would chain 2. Sometimes I chain 3 for double, depending on how my stitches are. So you can kind of play with that. So now that I've done that, yarn over. And the pattern will tell you, but usually that'll count as your first one. But depending on how the pattern is reading, that might be your first one or it might not be. Okay, so now I'm going to replace my stitch marker, yarn over, bring up a loop, bring it through 3, yarn over, bring it through 3. And then you'll just keep doing your increase round as instructed by your pattern. So let me go back and show you that again. And then I'll take any and all questions that are crochet related. Let's keep them. Okay, so I finished my half doubles. Let me just do one more. So finish my half doubles for my round 1. This marks my first half double from the first round. So I'm going to join it. So this is working in joined rounds. And then just bring it through, join it with a slip stitch. Do that one more time. I'm gonna bring it up closer. Let me know if you guys are able to see what I'm doing or not. I can try to get a different angle. So you just go through that stitch and we're just gonna join it with a slip stitch. And then you have to remember to chain up for whatever is appropriate for the stitch that you're doing next. And then you just do whatever you're going to do in the next round. Okay. Questions about doing crochet in the spiral, crocheting in the round using a spiral, or crocheting in the round using joined rounds. So if you do use joined rounds, you will get a seam that runs up kind of the back of your project. It's kind of a diagonal, kind of goes on a slight diagonal. And if you do spirals, you won't get that seam, but what you will get, show you this. So let's just pretend for the sake of argument. Okay, so I'm working on my project. And if this were a hat, or if this were a different type of project, and just for the sake of like not, doing too much and wasting your time. Okay, so let's just pretend, and it would look the same. Let's just pretend I finished my round. And if I did finish the round and went clear around to here, it would still look the same. What happens is you kind of get that little step. So it does kind of look like a snail shell, right? And then the snail would be coming out there. But you do get that little step. And so one thing you can do to kind of minimize that step, to kind of step down from it. So I did a half double. Next, I'm going to do a single. And that brings that step down. And then the next stitch, I'll do a slip stitch. And then you can see that it kind of brings that step down so that you don't, if you're making a hat, especially, like, you don't want like a big step, a big zigzag kind of a step somewhere on, because it's going to work its way and it'll be in the front and where it'll look really bad. So that is how you handle that step if you're doing in spirals. Okay, what questions do we have? I'm going to wait here just for a second and see if we have questions.
We do have some questions. We had a question about the stitch marker. And is that used to count how many rounds you've done, or just where one is going to start or end?
Well, you could do it both ways. If you have more than one stitch marker, you could leave that stitch marker each time you do a new round and add a new one. And then that way you could keep track of how many rounds you've done. But in the way I'm using it here, I'm just using it to mark the beginning and the ending of the round, so I know when I've started a new round. Okay. But you could do both. You could do either.
And then someone wanted to know, with the joined round, where did they do the next stitch? I'm going to guess they mean the next stitch after the joining, after your slip stitch.
That's kind of a tricky question, but let's look at it and we'll talk about a few options. So what I'm going to tell you is if you're doing this and you're following a pattern, the pattern will tell you some information here. But I just wanted you to see this so that if you see a pattern that says we're going to work in joined rounds or work in a spiral, that you won't be surprised. You'll be able to know what to do. Okay, so for a joined round, I finished my round. Here was my stitch marker. So I'm going to join my round. So I'm going to go into that first stitch, join it with a slip stitch. Now I'm working half double. Let me do that again. Maybe it wasn't showing on camera clearly. Sometimes I forget that I have to watch my angles. Okay. So that's my first, I kind of stretched it out of shape. It wouldn't normally be quite that big. So I'm going to join it with a slip stitch that goes through there. Okay, so now my round is finished. And if this was all I was making was just this little circle for some reason, you would just cut it and then you would have a nice smooth finished round. But I'm going to continue my round and I'm going to do half double. So I'm going to chain 2 for my half double. Okay. Now here's where the question kind of comes into play. And this is where your pattern would tell you. So this chain, sometimes they will say that counts as a stitch, but sometimes they'll say it does not count as a stitch. So you'll have to read your pattern carefully. But either way, since I'm increasing, I'm doing 2 in each one. I'm going to count that as a stitch just for fun. And I would make my next stitch right in that first half double from the previous round where I joined it with a slip stitch. So go right in there. And then what I end up with is this chain 2 is going to end up, I'm going to count that as a stitch. And then my half double here is counting as a stitch. So I would count that as 2 stitches. And then move your stitch marker up. And then I'm going to do 2 in the next one because that is what my pattern is instructing me to do. So I know that might sound a little confusing because it doesn't really pertain to this pattern for this project. But again, I just wanted to make sure you guys knew about it so that if you do see if you want to do a project and it says working in joined rounds, that way you'll know what to do. Okay, any questions at all?
We did have a sort of related question, whether a pattern would tell you if you're working in spiral rounds or in joined rounds. And I Maybe they will and maybe they won't. But I think a good way, apologies for that. I think a good way to figure it out is if you see directions to chain at the beginning or end of a round.
Yeah.
That's usually a way where you can tell you're working in a joined round.
Or sometimes, won't it usually say join with a slip stitch?
It will say that too, yes. But if you're
Yeah.
just, reading over it real quickly and you see a bunch of chain whatevers.
Claire, would a
Yes.
pattern ever just say, like, work 15 rounds and let you decide, or will they always decide for you? What do you
I'm
think?
sure some patterns are just going to say, work X number of rounds and they won't specify a method. Hopefully, there's been at least a couple rows of setup before that. And so
Mhm.
you would just follow the method that they've already laid out. But yeah. And then we did have a question about how to make a larger circle. And I'm not sure if that is inquiring as to how to keep increasing and make this larger, or how to start with a larger circumference, like if you are making a hat from the brim up to the top.
Well, so if you wanted to keep making this circle larger, that's what the pattern is telling us to do. So you would just keep doing your increased rounds. And this one is instructing me, this round is having me work 2 half double crochets in every stitch. And that's for the second round. So I'm doubling it. And let me get a couple of stitches going here and you can kind of see how it will increase it. So you can see how it's like this half of the circle is much larger than the other half. So that is how you increase the circle to make a larger circle. So if you were making a hat, a lot of times the hats will have you start at the very top of the hat, the very center of the top of your head, and they'll have you increase until it's the circumference of your head, and then you'll stop increasing and just work straight on making the sides of the hat. And so this is kind of what that would look like. So I'm just going to finish this round and then I can show you how.
And you'd probably also use this method if you were starting like a bag from the bottom of the bag and working up, or even if you were starting a sock from the toe.
Yes. Okay, so now I finished my second round. So here is my my first stitch from that round. And I'm going with what the pattern is telling me. The instructions in the pattern are to work spirals. So I would just yarn over for my half double, go right in that stitch, and then pop that on there to mark my beginning. And then for the next round, I'm going to do, it's having me do switch to single crochet. So let's talk about a single crochet. So I'm going to join this with a single crochet. Sorry. So you just enter the stitch, yarn over, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through all. So so because I've been doing half doubles, my natural instinct is to want to start my single by doing a yarn over, but you have to be very careful and don't do that, because a single crochet, you don't yarn over first. You just enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, and bring through both. Right, but for this pattern, I'm going to do one single, and then I'm going to, in the next stitch, do one single, and then in the next stitch, I'm going to do 2 singles. So I'm going to enter, and then So do two, the next stitch, do a single, and the next stitch, do a single. Oops. And then in the next stitch, you do two single. And I'm not sure why they decided to switch from half double to single. It does give a different texture. It is going to look a little different, but usually for amigurumi projects, you will be working mainly in single crochet because the fabric is a little more dense. It's a little stiffer, so it helps it to hold its shape better. And because the fabric is a little more dense, it will, the stuffing you won't see the stuffing through the holes as badly. So that's another reason why usually they will have you go down a size. So if you're using a yarn that calls for a J hook, they might have you use a K. I'm sorry, they might have you use one smaller, not one length bigger. So they might have you use like an I or even an H or even maybe a G. So they'll have you go down a size or two or maybe three, depending on your particular crochet tension. So any questions at all about getting started in the round? About anything we've talked about so far?
We did have a question all the way back at the beginning about whether with the, chain two and then work into that first chain, does that make an adjustable loop like the magic circle would?
Technically, no, but let's look at some options for there. So for the magic ring, so for the magic ring is really why you want your tail to control the size of your loop. So double check when you make your slip knot that the tail is what's controlling it. And then I'm going to chain two for my half double. And then I'm going to go right in that, in my slip knot. I think this is what I did when I did the first one, when I technically wasn't supposed to, but I like the magic rings, so I probably just defaulted to that by mistake. But I'm doing all of my half doubles in that slip knot. Do you like a magic ring, Claire, or no? What do you like?
I do like the magic ring, but I feel like I have to look it up each time because I don't crochet in the round that often. So
from now on, you can just refer to this video.
I can.
Okay, so like you wouldn't, if you were making a hat or something, like you wouldn't want a big, or even a stuffed animal like a jellyfish, you wouldn't want that big hole. But let's see if I did it right. If you just go ahead and pull that tail, see as I'm pulling the tail, it's closing that up. I don't know if you can see. And then pull it really tight. And then you can see it closed it right up. And then when you just weave that tail in at the end, then it'll be sealed. It'll be up, sealed shut very nicely. And then I'm going to just work in continuous rounds. So I'm going to do my yarn over for my half double. I'm going to go through. So when you're doing the joined round, you join with a slip stitch, but when you're doing the spiral, basically you're doing nothing. So you might feel like you're not quite understanding or seeing that thing that I'm doing because there's nothing to do. You just kind of keep going round and round and round. Okay. Any questions about getting started? So I'm going to go back to my other pattern, my other one. So if we refer to our pattern, it's we reviewed how to do a half double crochet, 2 single crochet in the next stitch, and then single crochet in the next one, going around. And what happens is you're going to be increasing your stitches each round. So for round 3, you start with 2 single crochets in the next stitch. You're going to single crochet in the next stitch and then repeat from the asterisk. So when you're beginning the next round, that round, you do 2 single crochets in this stitch. And then in the next stitch, you do just 1 single crochet. And then in the next stitch, you'll do 2. And then you'll do that all the way around until you finish your round. So do 2, and then do 1, and then do 2. And after you finish that round, all the way around, then you'll just continue following the instructions until you're increasing, until you get up to 64 stitches. Now, for something like this, if I ended my round and I only had 63 stitches, or if I had 62 stitches, I probably wouldn't worry about it so much because I'm making a jellyfish and I feel like if I'm off a stitch or 2, it's probably fine. What I would do, I would look at my piece. So I didn't even count. This is the top piece that we're making. And when I finally finished the top piece, I didn't count how many stitches I had. I just finished it. It looks right. It looks good enough. It's going to fit together. So I went with it. So I didn't even count my stitches. Now I know other crocheters will be very upset by hearing me say that, and they will insist on counting every stitch. But you can decide at what level of anxiety you want to live your life and act accordingly. I try to have as little anxiety as I can, and I'm not always doing so good at it, but crochet is not going to be adding anxiety to my life. I'm using that as something fun. So, if you're off a stitch or 2, but your project still looks like it's going right, chances are you'll probably be fine. How do you feel about that, Claire?
See, I'm more of a perfectionist, you might call it.
Yep.
So I probably wouldn't rip back, but I might add a stitch or 2 until I got to the right count. But
Okay.
whatever works for you.
Yep, that's why I wanted your opinion, because I know you have a different opinion. So I like everyone to express, and everyone likes to live their life. Live your life and live your best life and enjoy it. Is what I say. Okay. So let's pretend we're going to use our imaginations and pretend I finished clear up to round 8, and I have 64 stitches. I want to show you how to. It's really easy, but I do want to demonstrate it. 2 single crochet in the next stitch, single crochet in the next. Oh, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted to demonstrate. Okay, so we're still increasing here. Okay, let's go to round 16. So half double crochet 2 together, half double crochet in the next 7 stitches, and repeat from the asterisk. So we're doing decreases. We're kind of bringing it in smaller. And then rows 17 through 19, we're just going to half double crochet just straight on, maintaining these 64 stitches. Round 20, we're going to half double crochet 2 together, half double crochet in the next 6 stitches, and then repeat. We're reducing down to 56 stitches. And so let's look at how we accomplish that. So half double crochet 2 together. So for half double crochet, you start with the yarn over, you enter the stitch, yarn over, bring up a loop. Okay, and we're going to just rest here for just a second because we're doing 2 together. So we're going to yarn over for our half double, enter the stitch, bring up a loop. So now we've incorporated 2 stitches in all this. Yarn over, and then pull it through all the loops. And sometimes it's hard to kind of tease it through all those loops. Okay, so let me demonstrate that one more time, and then we'll see if we have questions. So half double crochet starts with the yarn over, enter your stitch, yarn over, bring up a loop, yarn over for the second half double, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, and then yarn over, pull it through all. Okay, how do we feel about that? Have we done that before? Is that new? Yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over for the next half double, enter the next stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, and then kind of tease that through all of them. And sometimes you have to kind of help it. And then you're ready to start whatever it is you're going to do next. And that will start to cause your piece, instead of laying flat, that'll bring it up so that it's starting to come up like a bowl shape to kind of start making the sides. How do we feel about that, Claire?
I think that's pretty good. We do have a question. Someone wants to know, is that also sometimes called a cluster?
Not really. Clusters are a different thing. So that's not called a cluster. Have you ever seen it called a cluster, Claire?
I have not, no.
Yeah, a cluster, we're not going to get into clusters today, but a cluster is more like what it sounds like a group of stitches kind of clustered together, but that's for another day. So any other questions? So I do want to show you a couple variations of this. So sometimes when I do it, if I'm getting a lot of like bulk, or sometimes I will start my half double, and then instead of yarning over for the next half double and going in, sometimes I'll skip that yarn over and just go into the next one, bring up a loop, and then go through all. And that's kind of like if you are single, like you're doing a half double and a single together. But sometimes that'll give you, if you're working with really bulky yarn, sometimes that'll give you a little less bulk. So yarn over to start, have 3 loops. And so officially the official correct way is to yarn over and go into the next stitch. Sometimes I skip that yarn over, enter, bring up a loop, and then, so it's kind of like doing a half double and a single together. And then another way I've seen to do it, I like to give options. Sometimes options make it better and sometimes it makes it more confusing, but I think options are nice to have. So you start it like normal. And instead of going through the stitch like normal, like both, you just go through the front loop. Yarn over, bring up a stitch, bring up a loop. And then the next stitch, again, you just go through the front loop, yarn over, bring it through, and then yarn over and bring it through all. And that's supposed to be an invisible one. It's not actually invisible, but it does, again, have a little less bulk in it. Excuse me. So that's just some options. The official correct way is yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through all. But I don't always like to be official. So I'm just letting you guys see some options so you can make the decisions and live your life accordingly. Okay, so that's how you do decreases though. And that will start to make your piece, it's what kind of creates this bowl shape. And so if you're not making an octopus, if you're making a hat, you would follow these same type of instructions, to create the hat. Usually when you create a hat, you'll make a flat circle. You'll continue your increases until it's the size you need, like for an adult, a child, or a baby. And then instead of doing decreases, you'll just start doing straight on. So if you have 64 stitches, you'll continue with 64 and that's what makes the size of the hat. But this could be made into a beret. So you make this big part of the hat, and then you decrease in, and then this is the size of your head, and then you make a little bit of sides then to fit on your head. So that's kind of how you could make it a beret. So once you learn these skills of crocheting in the round and increasing and decreasing, you can make all kinds of projects. You can go forth and crochet hats and all kinds of things. So, but then once you do your decreases, that's what brings it in. It's just what it sounds like. You're decreasing the size of your circle. So instead of being this big, now it's that big, okay? Any questions about that?
We did have a request to see the last decrease option where you went through just the front of the stitch again.
Okay. So when you're doing a stitch, so normally you go through here, where you're going through this loop and this loop. So normally you're going through both loops. You've got here and here. But for half double and for the invisible decrease, which is just less, let's call it less visible. Let's not call it invisible. You're kind of splitting that. You're just going through here. So you just have the one strand. Yarn over, bring it through. And again, here, instead of picking up both of these right there, you're just going to be picking up the front strand. So yarn over, go through the front, just one strand on the hook, yarn over, and then this is like, it's less, let's call it less visible instead of invisible, but it's less visible. But if you're making a flat piece like a baby blanket, you might not want to do those because it is going to have a different texture on the back. You can't really see it now because we just did one, but it's going to cause like a line. Maybe that's fine. Maybe you like that. Maybe you don't like it. But if you're making a hat or something that's going to be in the round and you're not going to see the inside, then it's not going to make much difference at all. Okay. So to make the base, oh, here's the base. So the base of it's basically the same as you start the top. So you're going to work the same as the top through round 7. And at round 7, you're going to join with a slip stitch, the first stitch of round 7, and fasten off. So basically, they're going to have you end it. They're going to have you work in a spiral, but then they're going to have you end it with a joined round. So you would just join that with a slip stitch right there. So the top of it is the base, I'm sorry, is very easy to make. So we've reviewed all of this skills you're going to need to make each one of those pieces. And I do want to show you how to make the tentacles quickly. It's very easy. It's a bit tedious, but it is easy. So you start with your slip knot. And for the tentacles, it's going to have you chain 45. So I'm going to do a couple chains. So 2, 3, 4. Everyone's good with chaining? I think the thing with chaining is you just kind of want to reposition your grip. Like after you do so many, I reposition my grip so that I'm kind of holding it closer to the hook. You have to do 3 or 4. Like I don't think I would want to continue like this. Seems like it's harder to do, so I kind of reposition my grip often. Okay, 43, 44, 45. Wow, that was quick, right? 45. Who knew? All right, so we're going to do double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. That means we've skipped 3. And then we're going to do 2 double crochets across. So when you're counting how many chains from the hook, this one on your hook never counts. So when you're counting, when it says so many from the hook, because that's on the hook, that's not from the hook. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going in the 4th one, which means we're skipping 3. So for a double, yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring through 2, yarn over, bring through 2. And we're doing that, we're doing 2 in each one. So then you go to the next one, yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through 2. And so what's going to happen is basically we're going to double. We're going to go from, we're going to double how many we started with. And if you didn't want to chain 45, if you wanted to chain 55, or if you wanted to do them different lengths and make some of them 25, you could totally do that. But you just want to do 2 double crochet in each one. And that's going to make it so that there are too many stitches and it will not be able to lay flat. And that's what's going to force it to kind of make those curly cues. Okay, any questions about how to do that? It's pretty simple. It's by the time you've made 3 or 4 of them, you're going to realize that it is kind of tedious, but just put in a good movie or listen to a podcast or some nice music, or maybe you have a book on tape.
Question on working into the chain. Do you always go through just one strand?
Well, you know, there's several ways of working into a chain. For something like this, I would probably just go through one strand because it's not going to make much difference. You can go through both strands, 2 strands like that. Or, let me see if we can find the bump. The hardest way to do it is there's a bump on the bottom. So here's the chain. If you turn the chain upside down, so if you turn the chain upside down, you can see it, you end up with this bump on the bottom. And so you can go through that bump, which is kind of hard to do. Kind of have to make sure you're getting in there and don't split your yarn, which I'm almost doing. And then join it. And the nice thing about if you go through the bump, it gives you a nice edge, which if you're making a scarf or like the bottom of a hat or the bottom of a sweater, you might care about. But other than that, like for a jellyfish tentacle, I probably wouldn't put myself through it. So there's the top of the chain. You can kind of see the V shapes. But if you turn it upside down, you can kind of see that. It almost looks like a purl bump if you're a knitter. And then you go through that. And because you're doing that on the bottom, like you're turning it upside down to do it, what happens is then when, if you do the whole thing like that, then your edge looks like this. So your edge will then look like how the top of your chain looks. And then when you finish your project, see the top of your project looks like this, and then the bottom of your project will look the same. So if it's a scarf, then it's nice if both sides look the same. But for a tentacle, I probably would just go through whatever's the easiest. So what would you do, Claire?
Yeah, I'd say for this particular instance, going through one, but like you said, for a scarf or a blanket, or if I'm feeling fancy with a dishcloth, I do like to go through the back bump.
Oh, you're a fancy dishcloth person.
And we do have just about 5 minutes left in class time. So we'll take a couple more questions.
At the curl. Okay, let's have a question. Any questions?
I also wanted to remind everybody that this class has been recorded. So if you want to watch it again, it'll be posted on the Michael's YouTube channel.
So after you've made all your tentacles, just with a large eye blunt needle, you can, I actually sewed my top and bottom together first and stuffed it and then put the tentacles on after, just because I felt they'd be in my way if I did it like this. But almost seems like it makes more sense to do it. So all you do, I left really long like tails on mine, and you just kind of feed those through the base. And then all I did, and because this is going to be on the inside, I didn't even do it very neat. I just tie up like a really tight square knot, which I'm not going to do because I want to use this for the next time I demonstrate. Nothing fancy, just like a super tight like knot, pull it up close. And then you can just leave these on the inside, or you can weave them all in and be very official, but you can do whatever you decide. But for this, I don't have any Fiberfill with me right now, but just like any kind of polyester, like Fiberfill, you do want to just stuff it. You can stuff it very, very tight, make it very firm. That does tend to cause the holes to stretch open, and sometimes you can see the stuffing through that. You can stuff it very loosely, and then that way it'll feel much softer. So you can decide what's going to be better for your purposes. And then to sew it together, again, when I cut my tail, I leave a very long tail, and then I can use that for sewing. And one thing I will recommend is I have these clips. You can use like some kind of clip to hold them. You can use clothespins. You could use, if you have a couple of, like for the top of a potato chip bag, just something to hold it in place. You could just kind of tack it in place with a couple of loose stitches. You probably have something at home you could use if you don't have. These are quilters clips, which come in very handy. But you don't want to start like sewing and then realize, oh my gosh, I'm like 90% finished and I still have like 30% of it to work in, or I'm halfway finished and I only have 30% left and I'm going to have to really kind of stretch it out or something. But you would do this inside out. And the way I like to do it is if I were going to crochet, if I were going to continue to crochet, that's where I would go. I would go under those stitches right there. Or, and on this piece, you would go through there if you were going to crochet. So that's where I'm going to sew. So I'm going to take my darning needle and I'm going to go right under there and pick up that stitch, just like if I were going to crochet it. And then on this side, pick up that one. And then just join it. And you could do a whip stitch where you jump over and you always go enter it from the same side of the fabric. So my needle exited here, jump over it, and then enter it from this side. So I'm always exiting on one side and re-entering my fabric on the other side. That is the whip stitch. Or I prefer the running stitch. So my needle exited this side. So I'm going to enter. I feel like this looks neater. It might not actually be any neater, but so this way I'm never going over them. I'm always going, so I'm going like that. My needle exited this side. I'm going to re-enter the fabric on the same side. So it's almost kind of like a zigzag across. So this is a running stitch or a basting stitch. And for this type of project with crochet, it's actually very secure. You know, if you're sewing something, a basting stitch is just kind of temporary. But for this, because these loops, these stitches are very secure, it actually is a nice stitch for crochet or for knitting. So this is the running stitch. Or I'll show you the whip stitch again to contrast the difference. The whip stitch, you jump over it. And then your needle is always exiting the same side and is always entering. So jump over it, back to the original side. And then you just go all the way around and then you weave in your ends. But again, you would want to make sure you stuff it before you finish it. And the thing about seaming, a lot of people do get very nervous about seaming, but if you're following these stitches, like if you were going to continue crocheting, what that's going to do for you, it's going to space the stitches out all the same distance. and they're all going to go the same depth because you're just going through that stitch. And that's what's going to give you a nice even seam. You know, spacing your stitches out evenly and going the same depth. And because you're using the same yarn you made it with, then these stitches are going to be invisible. So you don't have to have any anxiety or be nervous about your seam. Okay, so that's it. We've pretty much made, and just weave in your ends and, you know, fluff it up a little bit, and then you can make them all different colors. If you shape it like this, now you've got a tall one. You could squish it and shape it like this. Now you've got more of a short squatty one. So
can you turn it upside down again so we can see the underside and where everything's attached?
Yep, I just tied them on. I had lunch with a friend of mine over the summer, and her daughter just had a baby, and she had the baby there, and she had one of these. Like, somebody had makes these and sells them on Etsy, and she had bought one of these for her grandson. It looked just like this. So apparently these are a thing. Babies like them. Who knew? So. Okay, that's pretty much it. Any questions? Oh, and we're at 5:02. I didn't go over very much, Claire. I'm getting pretty good.
I know, we're getting practice after a year of this.
A year and a half.
Yes, I agree with everyone in the chat. It is very cute.
Very cute. See, I have two different colors, so yep. And then once you make one, you can make changes to it and, you know, make it all different ways, different colors. You can make the tentacles different. You could put eyes on them. I mean, jellyfish don't really have eyes, but if you put like eyes, safety eyes on it, that might be cute. So what do you think, Claire? Would you put safety eyes on yours?
I might, because some jellyfish do have eyes, creepily enough.
And like here, they don't have them here, do they?
Not like a human eye, no. Like but it's like a light sensing organ that we call an eye.
Yeah,
yes.
But not like that. So yeah. All right. So what are we doing next week, Claire?
I was going to say, if anybody needs to watch this again, obviously the recording will be available on Michael's YouTube channel in about 24 hours, and then at michaels.com/classes about 24 hours after that. And if you want to join us next Monday, we'll be showing how to do some tapestry weaving.
And that's lots of fun. So, all right, practice your crochet. Oh, if you have any questions, you can contact me personally on either Instagram at Mr. Woolly Bear. Maybe Claire will put that in the chat. It's Mr. Woolly, M-I-S-T-E-R spelled out Woolly Bear, and that's Instagram. And then on Facebook, you can find me. It's just my name spelled out just like normal, and just send me a direct message with any questions you have, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. So I don't want to feel like anyone's like left out in the cold or like struggling without any help. So just let me know if you do need help. Keep practicing. Bye.